This is a Oney original podcast.
Do she have the booty?
Do she have the booty? She do. 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 As in money. Hello, and welcome to another episode of She Do, the show where we talk to women about getting that booty, getting paid, getting money, raking in the chips, getting the pirate's booty, getting paid.
The loot.
The loot. Thank you, Jerren. Thank you for joining us today, Jerren.
And you can call me Jay, so
Jay,
keep it comfortable.
Jay, welcome to She Do, Jay. So you are a psychologist, yeah?
I am, yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm a small business owner. I'm in private practice and have been for a few years now, and I'm in the Farmington Hills area. My specialty is health psychology, so I work with people on stress management and coping with illness. But then I also do life coaching and work with folks on just general mental health issues, anxiety, distress, achieving their goals, and other fun stuff. So I'm a private practice psychologist, and I enjoy it.
Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing.
So, Dr. J used to be my therapist. There was a point of time, I think I was turning 25 and I was having a quarter life crisis. So I wanted to kind of speak to someone to see if I was just overthinking things, as most people do. So I invited her to the show because I thought it would be a good idea to kind of speak to millennials about mental health, depression, and anxiety. I know a lot of people experience imposter syndrome and FOMO, and a lot of people don't really know too much about emotional intelligence. So that's what this podcast is about today. So Jay, could you tell me what made you, like, at what point did you know that you wanted to be a therapist?
Probably for some years now. So growing up in my church, was a youth group leader and would inevitably be spoken to about life issues from the teens that I was working with. And so I think from there, going into undergrad, I knew that this was something I wanted to do. At one point, though, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I almost backed off and went that route. But I realized that wasn't really authentic to who I am. And so I stayed on course and pursued my degree all the way to PhD, and I'm really glad that I did. Yeah. So I knew early on that this was for me. It felt comfortable, it fit me, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay. And so could you explain to me the difference? Because I think a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. The difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of people are confused. But what it boils down to basically is this. Psychiatrists typically prescribe medications, what we call psychotropic medications. So that's your Xanax, that's even your Adderall, although some primary care providers can prescribe these as well. Your Effexor, medications for depression, anxiety, and so on. They typically manage your medications. Now, some psychiatrists still adhere to like the old school way where they might still give you like 20 minutes to a half an hour of therapy, right? Talk therapy. But for the most part these days, they're much like primary care providers where they have a small amount of time to see folks. They focus on managing medications, and that's it. Psychologists, clinical social workers, counselors, we do psychotherapy. And so what psychologists typically tend to focus on is what we call evidence-based therapies given to help people with the mental health issues that they're dealing with. And so that's the difference. We don't prescribe medications, although in some states, psychologists are pushing to have that same right as psychiatrists. So give it a few years and the lines will be blurred even more. So, but for right now, if you want to talk with someone at length regarding any issues you're having, you're going to want a psychologist or licensed clinical social worker or therapist of some form.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like you have your psychiatrist that does the kind of initial diagnosis and like kind of prescription, and then you have something that's sort of more long-term with someone like you, yeah?
Yeah, you can think of it that way. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Awesome.
So could you tell me how a clinical health psychologist is different from any like other types of therapists?
Yeah. So it's just a specialty, specialization. So I am trained generally in clinical psychology, but in school I took additional coursework, additional practicum experiences, internships that provided me with the training that I need to specialize as a health psychologist. And I completed my my internship, and then my health focused postdoctoral fellowship through the Ann Arbor VA and University of Michigan Women's Health Clinic. And so that's really the difference there. You know, it's interesting these days where really, even folks without degrees are helping people with mental health, right? I mean, you go on YouTube, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, anywhere. There are folks who are utilizing their life experience to help people. And I don't look down on them. I don't think they're any less able to be helpful, but there is something to be said about experience and training that makes a difference in terms of outcomes. So I do advocate for folks to be with a licensed professional, and I do, of course, advocate for folks to meet with psychologists who have longer periods of training and experience typically.
How do you think that sort of changes, like the introduction of social media and YouTube and, you know, sort of these self-proclaimed like therapists, and do you think that they do more harm than good, or vice versa?
No, like let me step back. Not necessarily. And so, you know, we can't regulate people sharing about their lived experience, right? We can't tell people, oh, because you used to do drugs and you have that life experience and you've recovered and you've healed, you just need to keep your mouth shut. That's valuable experience. And what we know in mental health right now is that there's this push towards getting peer support specialists, which are people who have walked that road, the same road as the client, who've gone through the addiction or you name it. They've walked that path and they have their personal insight from their lived experience to share as helpful. So that's always great. I tend to get irritated, I guess, when there are people who are putting forth incorrect information or who make it seem as if their way is the only way, especially when they're not even a trained professional. Yeah. So that's where I start to get a little irritated. But I mean, you look at the celebrities these days. What's John Legend's wife's name?
Chrissy Teigen.
Yeah.
She pulled it out so fast.
They had a special on TV last night. That's pretty good. But night before. But anyway, I like her, and I think she really uses her social media platform to spread mental health awareness, as other celebrities are doing. And, you know, I had a baby not too long ago, and so I know she shared about her experiences with postpartum depression. And so I think, again, it's helpful when people, celebrities or otherwise, share their experiences. We get to destigmatize mental health issues that way and really help people break through and receive treatment that they need. Yeah.
So why do you think there's such a huge stigma? Well, I feel like now it's kind of evolving a little bit because of people are understanding that mental health awareness is necessary, is key. But why do you think it used to be such a stigma on mental health and going to see a therapist?
Yeah. You know, and I think it's different for different communities. So we know that communities of color, for example, typically have a harder time engaging in mental health care because of issues of distrust and discrimination. And we know by and large, even to this day, the majority of mental health providers are not in any kind of ethnic minority category. Now, they might have other minority experiences, be it due to sexual orientation or otherwise, but sometimes that difference in ethnic group and cultural identity can be a barrier. And so distrust for the longest time has been an issue with people of color, particularly African Americans, for quite some time. Otherwise, I think it's been hard because we live in a country where for the longest time, it's been thought that you need to be hardy, is what we call it, right? Hard, resilient, pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, get your act together, and you just move forward and push through. And so when you have that mentality, what I call an old school mentality, because these days with millennials and those younger, we tend to be more open to talking about mental health and more receptive of those issues. But for older folks, that was not the case. And so for the longest time, it's been, if you have these mental health issues, sweep it under the rug. I can't even tell you how many people that I talk to or have assessed clinically, and they don't know anything about their family mental health history. Not because there weren't issues. They'll say, well, I suspect X, Y, and Z, but because it was never talked about.
Yeah.
And so there definitely was this culture of fix your own self, be resilient, be hardy, and if you have issues, don't talk about it. Thankfully, in the last several decades, that's really been going away, and it will only continue to go away, I believe, given the recent pushes to talk about mental health issues.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too. I mean, on our show, on our show kind of, She Do, all about feminism and, being a strong woman. And I think part of what feminism is and being, strong and, an advocate for that sort of thing is advocacy for men who and their emotions and their feelings. And I think that's a huge part of feminism too, is that it's not like, it's not menism, but it's the idea that men can talk about their feelings and have emotions. And I think that in especially in the African American community, I can imagine African American men are probably extraordinarily difficult to get through to sometimes. And is that true, would you think?
I mean, I think if you look at the research, I don't know if there's a clear difference, let's say, between white men and African American men in terms of statistically speaking, but by and large, I think men have a harder time accessing their emotions. And I think it's interesting that you conceptualize men's mental health as part of feminism, because it's important. These men are raising women or young girls, right?
Yeah.
And so what we do know from research is that when you have emotionally accessible parents, both men and women, kids tend to grow into healthier adults, more well-adjusted adults. And that's true for little girls as well. And so
Absolutely.
I think you're right on track there with the importance to be placed also on men's mental health as it impacts the health of the women in their social network.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on what you said about African American views about therapy, because I remember before coming to see a therapist, in my adult life, I remember talking to a friend about it, and I was just like, I think I kind of want to see a therapist. And they were like, no, you need to pray. And I'm just like,
yeah.
And I'm like, no disrespect. And I would never disrespect God in that type of way. But
Certainly.
I'm just like, I feel like God gave people a gift to be therapists. So they're not here on the planet for no reason. Therapists are not chopped liver. We need them. And another thing is, I feel like a lot of people think that, especially African American people, think that you have to be in a very, it has to be, you going to see a therapist has to be something that's traumatic, something absolutely triggering and life-changing and life-altering has had to happen to you in order for you to want to reach out. So I just want to know, out of all of your clients, do you have a lot of millennials who come to you about, the things that they're facing? Because I recently read an article. It's from last year, and it says millennials are the most anxious generation.
Yes.
So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's truthful. I think if you look at just the statistics that the American Psychiatric Association, American Psychological Association, the Pew Research Forum, each of these outlets have put forth research that speak to the fact that, yes, millennials tend to have higher rates of anxiety than the generations before us. Now, what's interesting, and I actually just saw this on the doctor's show yesterday, it was spoken about how now those under millennials, so the teenagers, they actually have higher rates than we do.
Interesting.
So it's not just us, they're actually worse off than us. And the consistent link here is the access to social media, right? And so that's what they're putting forth as a reason for this spike in anxiety in our generations compared to the generations before us. And, of the clients I work with, I would have to say probably about 50% are my age or younger. So I do life coaching with folks that typically are in their 20s and 30s, psychotherapy with folks in their 20s and 30s. But then I also have a program called the Confidence Shop. And so I'm working with teenage girls, preteen girls on these very issues of anxiety, self-worth, self-acceptance. And so I agree with the research that's come out in the last several years where, unfortunately, we have high rates of anxiety. We can talk about the many reasons why. But the good news is that we tend to be more open, again, because of reduced stigma. We tend to be more open to talking about our issues with our friends and family, and then also going to get help.
Do you think that do you believe that there is more, or it's just more out there? Do you think that the levels of depression and anxiety and mental health issues have actually increased, or do you think that they're just, people are more okay with being visible with those troubles.
I think that's interesting. And one thing I have to say in any case is that even the statistics we see probably do not accurately reflect what actually exists in terms of prevalence of mental health issues, right? So these are, when you look at these studies, this is data based on people who have come forward and who have been willing to admit to their issues. So that said, I don't believe that we necessarily have higher rates or incidents of anxiety. What I think is, again, we're probably more expressive. Now, what I do think has changed is that we tend to be under a different cultural environment and social environment as millennials and those under us, compared to the people who came before us, right? The older generations, especially because of social media, right? And so you have this platform now where I think every one of us in this room grew up with access to, oh my God, what was it, like MySpace,
CrushBot.
CrushBot, what's CrushBot?
That's taking me back.
You
right?
don't know what CrushBot is?
No.
I actually don't know what that is either.
What? Okay, so CrushBot was I used to love CrushBot. Okay, so CrushBot was before Facebook. It was around the same time as MySpace. And it was kind of like, I'm trying to think, what could I compare it to? It was kind of like a mixture between like Black Planet and
Remember that too.
it was a mixture of like Black Planet and MySpace. But what I liked about it is, and I know this is gonna sound so crazy, but like they had a list to where like if someone came to your profile, you could see who it was. So it wasn't like, it wasn't a such thing as like weird people, like,
Right.
Of course it's weird people because people hide behind profiles, but you would kind of know who would come on your page, and then they would have like,
Yeah.
I wish I knew that.
I know, yeah.
they had this other thing to where like they would pick like certain profiles of the day, like if your profile was popular, it'll come up on their
That's nice.
homepage. So yeah, it's like I used to love CrushBot. Like
Yeah.
I wish it could come back.
The big thing that I had like before Facebook was Bebo. Do you guys remember Bebo?
I
I
do.
don't remember that.
I
feel
remember
like
Bebo.
hardly anyone remembers Bebo. It was so big for like maybe
Okay.
2 years in like 2007, 2008, I think.
Okay.
And I think you had to be, I don't know if you had to be 13 or if there was like no age at all on there.
Okay.
I'm not sure. But you could like decorate your profile however you wanted. And you could do like, that was
Yeah.
when like big sparkly gifts were like a thing at that
Oh my
point.
gosh, yes.
Like lips that were like all sparkly and like
mhm.
you could do like posts you can share. Like I remember everyone would do like really like themed profiles.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a little bit more like Tumblr almost.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I remember my sister being the goofy little goober she is. Everyone would do these themed profiles with their like, and it was so specific. Like my sister did like a strawberry themed one. So she had like a picture of her eating a strawberry in like
Oh
her
my
profile
Lord.
photo. And then she had like the background was all like strawberry themed, and it was all like the color scheme was like
Yeah.
throughout. It was like so curated. It was hilarious.
I
And
think
it's
we
just,
were
like,
obsessed with these things from then, right? If we think
Yeah.
about it, I mean, I remember spending time on my pages, like spending like not hours, but in the excessive time trying to figure out what pictures to put, what should I write, what should I post, what should I.
It
It was
a
so
lot.
much more curated, I feel like, at like 10 years ago. It
it
wasn't like
was.
everything that it's like wasn't like every waking minute. It was kind of like I'll do
Yes.
one post a day, but it'll be like a really good
Right.
post.
Yeah.
But now it's so accessible, especially
Yeah.
with Facebook and all of their many developments over the years. It's too accessible, if you ask me.
Do you think that's harmful for mental health for a lot of people?
Well, the research shows that it can be,
Mhm.
right? So I think the Monitor on Psychology actually came out with an edition on self-esteem last year sometime, or maybe early this year. But anyway, they talked about the negative effect of time on social media on self-esteem, self-worth, and that's really sort of seated within this issue of comparative living, right? But what they found is that those who have higher rates of usage of these social media platforms tend to be more anxious and have poor self-esteem and do more comparative living versus those who tend to abstain from those kind of platforms. So I think it definitely can be. I mean, if I think about my own life, I have a Facebook page, probably more so for business purposes. But I'm not on there a lot. I don't post a lot. I don't, and I think it's because of me understanding that, in my opinion, and you know, if you look at some of the articles that have come out, when people post excessively, they're looking for likes. They're looking for validation. They want people to notice their lives and make them feel good. And within my own self, I've had to learn, you know, for years now, I've had to learn, you know what? I don't need that kind of external validation. That doesn't mean that if you post things, you're some low self-esteem person who is approval addicted, but it just means that, you know, I tend to be more moderate in my life, and I find that that's helpful for me. And so, yeah, people who are excessively, I mean, I know people who spend hours on it a day, who spend hours updating their own page, looking at other people's pages, posting stories, and it can be an addiction. Yeah.
Oh, it can be. That's how I feel. I feel that way all the time. I feel like I'm on Facebook all the damn time. And I would love to know, I don't know if you have ever had to do like reversal, like Facebook social media addiction therapy. I feels like a thing. What would you say? How do you get off of it? That's like my question, is like every time I hear like my phone like ding, like the Facebook ding, you get like, I think I saw this on like some article or some show that every time you hear like the Facebook ding, you get like a rush of like serotonin or something.
Yeah, so the same drugs that work with addiction, actual addiction to alcohol, substances, food, you name it, actually kick into effect when we hear the ding or the notice or when we see the like, right? So we get a surge of dopamine and serotonin and we feel good. And so while we feel good, I mean, you have this kind of cycle where it's reinforcing this need for external validation to get that happiness or that sense of joy or pleasure. And I think that that's completely reversed and counterproductive to good sound.
It's like when the mouse rings the bell and gets the cheese. Every time it rings the bell, it gets happy just by ringing the bell, kind of thing. Yeah.
One thing that I noticed that helps with like, especially when you were talking about like comparison, what did you call it? Comparison.
I call it comparative living, right? Where you're constantly comparing your life to those of others around you or those of the lives of celebrities. And my thing is, in my whole push clinically, in my practice, in my life coaching, in my own life, it's all about authentic living, which is the complete opposite to that.
I just feel like with social media, helping to like taking the time out to intentionally unplug is very useful. Because like I remember having that conversation with you, but I was 24, and I remember just feeling anxious about like, what does 25 supposed to look and feel like? And Jay, I remember telling you like I wanted to be married. I wanted to have my own house. I had a long
at 25?
Girl, yes.
Girl, like I haven't even had a boyfriend for like long enough to like get married at 25.
But the thing is, like, I think in a sense I was comparative living. Like a lot of people in my family, like all of my cousins, they're like, you know, starting to have kids and like, you know, doing a lot of things. And I'm just like, well, am I chopped liver? Because like, what is this supposed to look like? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be in love with somebody? Should I try to, you know, date and all of this stuff? And it was just like literally like overload because, and I won't say that I was like addicted to Instagram, but like just seeing my peers, like people having kids, people buying homes, people, you know, starting businesses and like doing all of these things. And I know that I'm capable of doing it, but I was just so focused on when it was supposed to happen because I was looking at like social media, and I won't say I was like comparing myself like, oh, I should be here, but I'm like, is this what I should want this? Like I should.
Well, then subconsciously you really were, right? Because it's not like, oh, I wish I had what they have, but it does get you to start to think about where you are and to wish you could be as progressed as they are, right? As settled as they are, perhaps, right? So it does bring about that effect where it makes you compare yourself to others, and unnecessarily. We're all unique individuals. We have our own journey in life, our own history, our own lived experience, and that's what we should be living out of and not necessarily looking around.
Absolutely. It's interesting because social media is so selective. Obviously, someone's only going to post the photos and videos and posts of they're good, they're smiling, they're happy, their kid's not throwing a tantrum and falling apart. They're not, you know, concerned with how am I going to pay for having another fourth child? What am I going to do about that? They're just like, I'm so happy. Of course I'm happy. I'm not happy.
And you know what? And this is not based on like any research or anything. This is just my own opinion. But I feel like sometimes people post in a way to almost convince themselves that they're happy.
Yeah,
it's like, you know, behind the scenes, you have that crazy kid or that crazy family or high stress. And so you're posting happy things to not just create the facade, but almost to kind of make yourself believe that you're good. Right? So, you know, I think people definitely use these social media platforms in ways that can be unhealthy. And I agree with you, right? Take some time to unplug daily. I mean, I know some people who jump off of Facebook for like months at a time, take a break and then come back, right? So if that's what you need, then do that. That's fine. But you can do that in ways that are more moderated. Just,
Right.
turn your phone off a few hours before bed,
Yeah.
right? And go to sleep.
One thing that helped me, especially with like social media, because like when you first wake up in the morning, you're like, I gotta check emails, I gotta check social media, I gotta check my text, I gotta do this. So I remember, especially I was really doing it more this summer, and I gotta start doing it again. But over the summer, when I first woke up, I would leave my phone alone. Like my alarm would go off, and I would just leave it there, and I'm just like, okay, let me just lay in bed for a good 10 minutes, clear my mind, like prepare myself for the day. And that would kind of help me to kind of be a little bit more centered. And also another thing that kind of helped me out with social media was to unfollow like certain accounts that were a little bit like, how like sometimes you could tell like some people are on social media are just like, oh, let me just show you guys my highlight reel. And it's just like, girl,
Yeah.
I know you going through it. I'm sure you lost the eyebrow from being so stressed. So like I would temporarily like unfollow those type of accounts for just for a little bit, just so I could just.
I unfollowed a bunch of fitness blogs because I was like on this kick for a while where I was like, I should surround myself with only positive people on Facebook. And all they ever posted was like really nice butt pictures and like with inspirational quotes. And I had to unfollow them because I was like,
it's not real.
I can't look at it anymore. It drove me crazy.
It will drive you crazy.
So I have a question. How would you explain your method and style of therapy?
Oh, I guess if you've been on the receiving end, I should ask you how you've experienced it. But I tend to be a very comfortable person. And so what I mean by that is come in the door as you are. No need to put on any false pretenses or cover up anything. Let's be real with one another. Let's be transparent. Let's build an actual, therapeutic connection that can be helpful for you. And then let's move forward. What the foundation of my interventions typically tends to be is mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy with some cognitive behavioral therapy. So those are a lot of different terms, but basically, how can I center you, bring about clarity for you, and then help work with you to get you to where you want to be in life, accomplishing the goals that you have for yourself.
Oh, I like that. Can you elaborate? I heard you say what commitment. What is commitment therapy?
Acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's what do we call it? I think it's like a third wave cognitive behavioral therapy. But anyway, it really is a therapy that helps you focus on utilizing acceptance strategies to be at peace with the things in your life that are not okay or that are distressing for you, right? And so, for example, people with, I'm just going to use chronic pain. People with chronic pain, spend quite a bit of their life in their day-to-day experience trying to push the pain away, trying to avoid it, ignore it, deny it. They do things behaviorally that might make it worse because of that. And so acceptance and commitment therapy says stop the pushing, accept that it's there, make peace with it, learn from it, and then move forward, right? And so in some ways that brings about really reformative healing. In some ways it just gives you tools to utilize to be at peace with this thing and reduce the struggle. A lot of the distress that we have in our lives doesn't come from the actual issues that show up, whether it's like a bad relationship, chronic pain, a sucky job. It doesn't come from that actual thing, but the way we think about that thing and the way that we experience that thing emotionally. And when you learn to surrender, it reduces the struggle, it reduces the distress, and you tend to be better emotionally.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting.
And that has a lot of mindfulness underpinnings. And so I utilize mindfulness a lot, which focuses on acceptance, letting things go, letting things be, not judging things, not judging yourself. And I find that that's helpful, not just for me personally, but for my clients too.
Yeah, on the receiving end, I know that a lot of the times, like especially with people that care about you, like you'll tell them something and they'll immediately judge it. Like, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or you should, And I remember like starting therapy. I remember our first second session, or I think it was like my first like official session. And I remember like just thinking like, okay, so am I gonna just like be on the couch, or is she gonna ask me like these weird like questions? Like I didn't really know what to expect. But one thing that really like stood out to me was that you kind of like would set the tone, like, okay, so chill out, relax,
right?
Close your eyes for a good like 5 minutes. How do you feel? Like how do you feel? What are you feeling? Like breathing, like, and that would kind of help me be more relaxed, especially because I'm more so of a guarded person. So with me to be in a mindset of relaxing, helped out a lot. And then another thing that what I loved about, being a client of yours, a patient of yours, is your style as to like when I was telling you about like, oh, well, I want to do all these things. You're like, okay, look, sweetie, like she really put on the auntie voice, like, sweetie, look, there are people your age, there are people older than you that don't even have all of these things. Like, you need to chillax, embrace where you are right now, because it's a reason and a season for everything.
Exactly right.
And I just remember thinking like, okay, let me relax myself. Let me calm down. And not only that, kind of putting that into perspective, but you kind of helped me like list like my values, my the things that I want, and find helpful ways to go about those things realistically without thinking like, okay, well, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to get here. So I do appreciate that. And another thing that I wanted to ask you about is emotional intelligence. I feel like a lot of people lack emotional intelligence because it's not really as pushed as like academics or anything else. So
I never thought about that before.
Yeah, it's really not like and I didn't realize that I had low emotional intelligence until I went to therapy. Like, there were a lot of things like say for example, something would bother me and I'm just like, okay, let me just be cool, calm,
sometimes being
collected.
cool is not the correct
it's
response.
not. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
I have that problem for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I think I feel like a lot of women do, especially like we're all pushovers. There's so many. We're so many pushovers. Like we have such like pushover.
Yeah, because it's
behavior.
like it's always like that it's always pushed to you even as a kid. Like don't be a nag, or don't say this.
Be
or
the
don't
bigger person.
Yeah, be the bigger person. And so why do you think that emotional intelligence is not stressed enough for adolescents?
Well, I think it's interesting because if you actually look at what's happened over the last, several years, you actually do see a push towards that in the schools. And you can chalk it up to growing, rising rates of mental health issues amongst teenagers or whatever. But we are seeing more where even on the elementary level, they're introducing mindfulness programs for kids, right? And so there is some push to try to reform that. I actually, again, I have to go back to sort of social media and the fact that we all live our lives online. That's a big problem for me. And I think that's one of the main factors that stimulates and then also maintains lack of emotional intelligence, right? Sending a text message, you don't get all the data. All you get is some words written down. You don't get the verbal qualities, the nonverbal communication that's there. Excuse me. And so you miss out on opportunities to actually have to experience and interpret those nuanced interactions, right? Absolutely. So what happens when you don't have those? You don't create the ability to understand and process them and then apply that to yourself moving forward, right? You don't have that ability that's strengthened and developed. And so I do think, again, here with this push to folks living their lives, I even saw a term, FOLO, fear of living offline. Right. So, and that's more so for the generation under us, so the adolescents and whatnot. But it's this issue of living online, encountering others interpersonally through media or other mediums, right? Technology or whatever, that's causing this issue or contributing to this issue of lack of emotional intelligence. And so to remedy that, again, get into the real world. When I do some stuff online in terms of like seminars and whatnot, but the majority of my services I offer in person, despite the fact that even in mental health, there's this push towards video conferencing, video chat, texting for mental health. Those things are all fine and dandy, but I like to meet in person to help develop some of these deficits that might be there.
It seems like it's so much easy. It's too easy for people to get their emotions out like online and texting, and I think it's harder to do it in person, but it's ultimately better. Like, it's so funny that you're saying all that right now, because like last week I had like this weird situation with my friend, and I could not form the correct words in person what I wanted to say. Like, I could not figure out what my brain was trying to communicate.
Did you pull out your phone and just text it to her?
I did. Like the next day, like at like 11 o'clock that night, I like pulled out my phone and like sent this like, long ass text message, like explaining all of my feelings, saying, I'm sorry that I couldn't say this in person to you, but here's all my feelings. And then I just got the, a response that said, what did it say? Something just like, I'm not going to write an essay on it, but I'll talk to you later.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, what does that mean? Does that mean like, even interpreting like how a period is used in a text message drives me crazy.
Yes, you can misunderstand a lot of things.
If they just like make it a full, like a short sentence with a period on the end, I think they're mad at me.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're just using proper grammar now. It's like,
for me, like I just made it a thing because I hate, especially when it's something like serious. Like I'll text back, like say for example, like on my way or, you know, how's your day going? Like just stuff like that. But like if it's something serious, I make it a point to either call or do it in person.
Good for you.
Because like even though I did break up with my ex-boyfriend through a text message.
Oh no, you did?
I did. She do. She did.
Yeah, she do.
I did. But in my defense, he wasn't answering. However, but the thing is, like, I try to make it a point to like with things like that to make do a phone call because I feel like so many things could get lost in translation. So like,
absolutely.
Like how you said, like some people could like text back and it'll be like, ooh, they a little dry. What's wrong with them? And it's like, no, they're not dry. They're just busy. Like
I'm multitasking.
Yeah, like I'm doing stuff, but I know for me, like, cause I hate texting. Like I absolutely do. So like with all of my friends, I'll let people know, like, you know, I'm not a texter.
Good.
Like I'll just, if I'm real cut and dry with you, I'm not being dry. I just don't really like texting. Or if it's like, I'll just call like, hey, like I can't text right now. I'd rather talk to you. But I feel like a lot of people are having less conversations because you know, to pull out a phone and, you know, text how you feel is not as bad as, you know, confronting somebody face to face. And another one thing that I did want to ask you, as far as like emotional intelligence goes, how do you have children?
I do.
So how do you instill emotional intelligence into them as a therapist without making it seem like, well,
without experimenting on my
kids?
You know, it's like you're not shrinking your kids.
Right.
I don't know if I can not do that, but anyway, no. So let me give you an example. So first of all, before people think I'm an evil mom, I validate my kids a lot, right? And I think that's important to have a parent that you know loves you, thinks you're capable, thinks you're talented, thinks you're valuable. So all of those things are good. But I refuse to over-validate, and I refuse to validate when you're fishing for it. So for example, my daughter, my oldest daughter, she's 4. I have a stepdaughter who's 18 too, but my oldest daughter who's 4 does this thing where she'll do something and she'll come to me, look, mommy, see, I did a good job, or ooh, I'm so smart, or ooh, I do this so well. And I don't disagree with her, but I'm like, okay, fine. So I notice those tendencies, and I don't tend to over reinforce. I let her comments stand. So good for you that you think you are smart, you are capable, you do things well. And you know, there are other times when she'll ask me what I think. So what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And I'll flip it back on her. Well, what do you think? How do you like your hair? How do you like your coloring? How does that feel to you? How does that? And so what that does is, again, it takes the focus off of external sources of validation, and it puts it back on her. Girl, if you think your 2 pigtails look cute and you look like Pinkalicious off of PBS, good for you, right? You did that thing. And I try not to nitpick. So if their hair is out of place, I let it ride, right? She did her hair. She feels good. That's what matters. And so I think I try to focus on not over-validating or being an emotional crutch for them, although they're young. So like with my 2-year-old, I do things a little differently and keep things age appropriate. But I definitely want them to grow up being self-contained. So what does that mean? That means that you don't need to be posting your gym pictures every day on Facebook so that people say, girl, you look good. Look at you losing that weight. You don't need external validation. You're okay on your own. And so I'm starting from now to do that with them. And then even with my stepdaughter, she just, you know, she's a freshman in college, and same thing for her. You know, other people are focused on these things. That's fine. You are your own person. Be self-contained. Pursue things that make you feel good, that align with your values, and that create the life that you want to live. Right. And if they want to get on board, great. But you don't get on their board. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't jump onto their thing. You let them be. So I think that's what that's an example of what I do. And I try not to be the psychologist mom. So you have to ask my husband how I'm doing on that. But I try to keep it balanced.
So how would you say that, you know, for everyone that's listening out there in podcast land, what would you say is something that people should try to do more between adults and in the workplace and in their own personal lives? What would you say is something to kind of promote that together?
Yeah. I guess my first recommendation would be something that we've already talked about. Get offline, right? Get offline and get back into reality. Seek out actual face-to-face encounters with the people that you love and care about. Same thing with coworkers. It's so easy to send an email to a coworker about an issue instead of walking up, going to his or her cubicle and talking, right? Even if you think about when we ask for raises or time off, I think it's easier to do that through technology as well instead of going in person. And while that's helpful, while that's useful to people and that it helps them avoid discomfort and potential tension and confrontation, it's not helpful or what we call adaptive because it's not developing those skills within you. And so that would be my first thing is get off of the technology and start seeking out real face-to-face meaningful encounters with the people that you care about. The other piece is we live in a world where external validation is sort of the thing, right? So how, in terms of stepping back from that, start to get in touch with yourself, right? Be centered, understand your values, and start to actually live those out with you rewarding yourself for doing things well, right? That can start to reverse this sort of dependence on hearing from other people about how great you are, how talented you are, and it starts with you validating yourself along the way of your journey.
What kind of rewards do you think are positive awards that you can give to yourself? Because I think sometimes, you have your negative sort of awards, like, for me, it was like, I did good today, so I'm going to go eat a piece of cake. And but then it turns into, I had 6 pieces of cake today. Like, what's a positive way to treat yourself?
Sure.
Like, treat yourself. Like I say that all the time.
And it's important, right? And it can't be understated. I think certainly you have to know your tendencies. So if you're an emotional eater, maybe food is not the best way to reward yourself. But then maybe it's okay, right? And I talk with clients, with my weight loss clients, about the fact that it's not the cake that's the problem. Just account for it. So if you know you want 6 pieces of cake, girl, you just make sure your calories in other areas are kept within line, or you make sure that you're going to go work out today and tomorrow, right? So balance, right? You can have your cake. But eat it too. That's right. But otherwise, comforting things, good music, good life experiences, buying concert tickets, going camping with friends, going hiking, sitting out in nature, drinking something good, eating some comfort food, mac and cheese, whatever. Know yourself, and the things that you experience as nurturing and rewarding, those are the things that you should do.
I like that idea. I think that's so much better than, buying stuff.
Yeah.
I think, I like to think, I'm going to go online and buy myself a new dress today because I earned it, or I deserved it, or I'm going to go get some food. But I think I like the idea of experiences, because experiences can only positively kind of affect you. It seems
and
like.
I think in my own life too, I'm moving in towards like this minimalist living, and so less emphasis on stuff, more emphasis on life experiences, where the memories last forever, but the dress fades, and then you got to toss it out or give it away, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have a question. So do you feel like, I know a lot of people are pushing for self-care. Now, I read an article that was basically about, I can't remember where it was from, but they said that people are starting to make self-care into a trend. Like, so say for example, my idea of self-care is like, say for example, I'm just like, okay, I feel overwhelmed. I need to take a day. Like I just need to take a day to just, calm down. Yeah. But some people are using self-care like, I'm not feeling like working today, so let me call in and just say I need this for self-care. So do you feel like people are
taking advantage?
Yeah.
I think so. I think I think that can be the case. However, with the clients that I typically work with and the people that I typically interact with, it's usually the opposite, that they are not taking the time to do those things that are restorative and nurturing to their soul, right? So it's the complete opposite end of the spectrum. For those on the end where they're abusing it, I think that can be a problem because, you do actually have to work towards the things that you want in your life. Right. And so if you don't want to go to your job in that day, that's fine. But when your paycheck is docked and you can't get the shoes that you want, or you can't save up for retirement, or whatever the case, you're sabotaging yourself. So in all things, balance is appropriate.
I think personally, me and my friends, like, at good old art school, everyone is riddled with anxiety. It's fabulous. So we always would talk about like self-care. I'm going to go do a face mask and, use my bath bomb, but I'm still going to be a anxious wet person now.
Yeah.
I'm anxious and I smell more like lavender. But
Now I
like,
smell good, but the anxiety's gone nowhere.
yeah, like
Yeah.
so what? So that's like I always think about that, just sort of like
Yeah.
what is the right way for self-care?
Yeah.
Do that. Yeah.
You know, and there is no right way, and
Mhm.
but there are wrong ways, right? So I think utilizing like substances in excess, becoming overly emotionally dependent on the people around you so that you can feel good and feel meaningful. I think those are all harmful in their own way. I think the best way to do self-care is to be clear about what you actually experience as restorative. So not just what feels good, but what refills my fuel tank so I can go back at it and she do all day long,
Right.
right? And get that done all day long. You know, without that, you're gonna be on empty. You're gonna be run down. I'll share. I myself, I had to take 2 weeks off a few weeks ago, just because between work, business, contracts, kids, marriage, just everything. I was like, oh my Lord, like I was getting sick, feeling tired.
Yeah.
So I literally took 2 weeks off.
Oh wow.
And now I had my kids those 2 weeks, but it still was a relief. And so it's about being in tune with what your body's telling you, what your emotions are telling you, and then learn to take a step back and do those things that refuel your tank. So if it's movies, life experiences, connecting with old friends, sleeping,
Yeah.
do that.
Can always use more
So
sleep.
what are some of your favorite self-care practices?
I love to eat. So
Same, girl. Same.
Yes. So I eat good food, and you know, it's interesting because there is a balance when you do engage in emotional eating. It's really not helpful beyond a certain point, right? But that said, I can reward myself with chocolate, with a milkshake. I might bake a whole dang on cake if I need it, right?
Oh,
So,
yes.
you know, so I love food. Of course, everything in balance. So I love good music. If I am distressed on my ride home at night while I'm doing the dishes, I am blasting whatever makes my soul feel good in that moment. Right? So literally food, music, and then I'm someone who, when I'm overly stressed, I actually need to isolate. Not because I'm depressed, but just because I need my private space to self-regulate. And when I'm done, I'll come see you. You know,
I'm the
So,
same way.
yeah.
I like that. I think it's important to be able to say, hey, I need some space. I need to be
Yeah.
myself, but not like in a way that is cutting myself
Yeah.
off, but sort of, you know, just I need a little time out for myself.
The funny thing is, like, I like to call myself an extroverted introvert because I like people, but being around too many people at one time, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I need to, you know. And one thing that I did do, I remember, it wasn't this summer, it was the summer before that, is I literally disappeared, like from my friends. And I remember, like, I've always been that type of person, and I would feel bad, like, oh, let me tell them that I'm just gonna dip off for a while. And no, like, I did it unapologetically,
you.
and it was like the best thing ever, like, just to take time to yourself to recuperate your own thoughts, because it's so much like
like
information overload.
Yes.
It's like, especially like if you have a job where, you know, you have to get a lot of feedback, or you know, like, I know for me, I have a lot of my friends have strong personalities and strong opinions. So for me, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to take this time for myself. And it's very like useful. And so how do you feel like, do you find affirmations and like value statements like not important, but of course they are important, but do you find them useful for like mindfulness and trying to enforce like life change?
I think, well, you have to know yourself, because there's some clients I've worked with, well, they'll tell me straight up, like, Jay, this does not work for me. And it's like, great, let's find something that does, right? So positive self-affirmations and self-statements, you know, what do you call that? Your vision boards and all that kind of stuff. Not everything works for everyone, so you have to know yourself. Mantras, right? Even I myself don't necessarily rely on those kinds of things, but there may be times where I do have to encourage myself, like, you got this, you can do this, you've done it before, look at how you did X, Y, and Z. So self-encouragement can be helpful, but again, know yourself. And if those kinds of, because that's what's pushed a lot. If you read the average common article or blog, that's usually where it ends up in terms of recommendations. Positive affirmations, vision boards, self-statements, mantras. And again, no knock to those things, but those are not cure-alls or fix-alls, right? So you might actually need to get some other skills in place so that you can really, keep yourself together and encouraged to move forward in your living.
One thing I always have such a hard time doing, so I always feel like, especially like in my little community of like human beings, is I feel like that I always see like these journals and like mood boards and like dream journals and people, really kind of like who really love to share and post like inspirational quotes and love, talking about like, clouds and breathing and being in tune with oneself. But like, I feel like whenever like in my little like posse of like art friends, like our whole it seems like our entire shtick is like the classic, doom and gloom sort of aesthetic. But like, how does one sort of appeal to those other groups? I mean, we say like, with men and stuff, obviously, the average man, not that there's, they probably are not looking to make vision boards and do like dream journals and stuff like that. So what are there like other like kind of what other like just sort of weird ways have people that have been able to sort of get on board and in touch with themselves? And
that's interesting. So I want to speak to something really quickly. You hit on a good point, right? Packaging is everything. And there was a study done maybe like 2 years ago. I think it may have come out in the Monitor on Psychology. I'm not sure. But they found that there's an issue with mindfulness packaging. Yeah. So this is an intervention that across the board, from relationship distress, health issues, adjustment in life, you name it, this addiction, this thing is helpful. This technique, principle, whatever, mindfulness is helpful. But there's an issue with packaging. If you look at the typical intervention, the typical journal article, the typical blog, they have a picture of, some blonde, white, young woman doing yoga. Yeah. Right? That is not mindfulness, right? Now, certainly yoga includes a huge element of mindfulness. But what happens is when you look at that and you see that image, well, what about white men? What about black men, black women? What about old folks, right? Yeah. Or I don't know, that probably sounded rude, but folks who are older in age, right? What about the youngsters, right? That's not really an inclusive vision of what mindfulness is. And so there has been this push to try to diversify what it looks like, which I think is good. It's a good thing. In terms of other ways, I have some male clients who, they go to the gym, they do kickboxing, they do some kind of bodily thing, woodworking, crafts, technology. Those kinds of activities help them feel centered, helps them feel connected to themselves, right? So you have some of those alternate activities, I guess, that can achieve the same purpose. Music for some that I've worked with can be really helpful and relaxing and peaceful and centering. And so it doesn't always have to be clouds and flowers and sunshine and visualization and like peaceful yoga pose.
I was thinking of like cursive and like rose gold things. And like I always get a planner. Like I was looking yesterday on Amazon for a new planner for myself. Every single one of them, I kid you not, has a page for like vision boards. Yeah. And it's all like rose gold and sparkles. And I'm like, I want to be a little bit punk sometimes.
Right. Can we get some black in here, or some green, or some red, or
something else?
Some more pronounced. Yeah. I think you're right. When you look at things, they're typically geared towards women, and the sort of stereotyped woman, like flowery, pink, glittery. And that's okay. I think we all like to feel a little flowery and glittery at times, maybe, but not everyone. Right. And so, can we get the punk rock journal? Can we get the sports one? Whatever. But yes, there are ways that you can find that doesn't fit the stereotyped mold of mindfulness. The whole purpose of that really is to know yourself, be centered, and stay connected to yourself. So there are lots of ways you can do that. And I just encourage folks to start experimenting with things that they've heard or seen or things that they think might work for them. And eventually they'll find something.
And I have another question that I have for you is, how should a person know that they found the right therapist? So prior to finding Dr. J, I had a therapy session with another person. So I know one thing that was important for me is to have someone find a therapist that has the same background as me, and like that was just my main thing. Someone that could understand my life experience. So I went to this woman, and I guess I didn't do my research on her because her style was more so for people who went through like traumatic incidents. Yeah, like you know, children like dealing with like abandonment issues and you know, experience like being around like domestic violence and things like that. So our first session, I remember telling the woman like what I was anxious about, you know, what was on my mind, what was on my heart, while trying to be as transparent as possible without feeling like, should I feel this way or whatnot? And I remember after our session was over, she was like, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. And I remember being like,
I remember you told me
yeah,
that.
I remember being like, like how dare you? And I was just like, so how do people like know what type of therapy they need or what type of therapist they should seek?
Yeah, I think your example it's funny. So, sorry, it is a little
it's hilarious.
But I think it highlights something that is critical, right? So maybe instead of saying, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you, you know, she could have validated or expressed an understanding of your issues that you're experiencing as real. Right. Yeah. So you may not have been like raped or abandoned or gone through this significant PTSD provoking life experience, but you're legitimately in your own form of distress. Otherwise you wouldn't have been there. Right. And so I think that it's important to have a therapist that can validate the issues that are presented, but it is important to seek out those who have experiences and work with the kind of issues that you are having. So read their blogs, read their websites, talk to them, ask if you can do maybe a free consultation on the phone or in person to see what they're like. I always do free consultations because I don't want to work with you if we're not going to be a fit either. Right. So ask for that and then go from there.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I think definitely feeling like you made a connection is important because I haven't seen a therapist in a long time because I think just like the last time I was like, oh, it was so bad and I didn't like it. So if it felt bad, you know, you don't want to go back. You don't want to waste time. But yeah, try somebody else. So I think that's always a really really nice, important thing to do. And I think it's important to see someone even if you're not having a clear problem, you know. My friend,
what I did with you was life coaching. It wasn't like, you know, psychotherapy for mental illness. You know what I mean? It's life coaching. And I think everyone can benefit from talking to someone. There are even psychologists who have psychologists, right? So who have their own psychologists.
I don't trust a psychologist that doesn't have one because you take in so much every day. And I know a lot of people, like a lot of psychologists are, you know, you have to be a caring person to hear someone's issues. And I know that sometimes like when you're caring, you're like, damn, like I feel so bad for them. So I don't trust like that's like people that offer like mentorships. I'm like, do you have a mentor? Because if you don't have one, I don't trust you.
And if not a psychologist or a mentor, then a designated person that you can go to. Right. And so I have friends who happen to be psychologists that we kind of debrief each other. But then I also have my spouse or even my sister. You know what I mean? And so have those outlets that can again reset you and restore you. Would be my advice.
So this episode will air at the top of the year, so in March. So do you have anything coming up in 2019 that you want people to attend or participate in at all?
Yeah, sure. So you know, for time's sake, I'll just keep it short, but I want to encourage folks to visit my YouTube channel, Sincerely Dr. J. I have some videos on, and I'm relaunching a whole bunch more starting January. I also do offer marriage seminars, life coaching seminars, workshops, self-esteem, confidence workshops. All of those things you can find on my website, www.wellnessfirstbhs.com. And the BHS stands for Behavioral Health Services. So look me up. And we'll go from there.
I have to go to a workshop. I always wanted to go to like a group workshop.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to go to that.
I gotta check that out. I need to go. Right. So I want to thank you, Dr. J, for coming in.
No problem.
Yes, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
I love this conversation. I love this episode. I can't wait for people to listen.
Yes, so all of you out there in the future after this makes its appearance.
Right.
Yes.
And you guys, please check out Dr. J. She's a great therapist. I really enjoyed having her help me. She put a lot of things into perspective. So
girl, I'm gonna have to come see you.
Why not?
Yeah, you should. Like she's great. So thank you for listening to this episode of She Do. I am Bria Renee.
And I'm Natalie Berger. Thanks for tuning in.
Not see you, but you'll hear us in 2 weeks.
All right. Have a fabulous time until then. Toodaloo.
Bye-bye.
That was a One E Original podcast.